Hey everyone, this is Pick One, Pack One, everything you need to start your draft off right. I'm your host, Gavin McKay, and I'm here with my co-host, Paul J. Camo. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm good, Gavin. How are you doing?
I'm great. Today we're doing removal for Aetherdrift.
Yeah, so this is our removal guide, Aetherdrift edition. We're going to talk about all the ins and outs of killing things, bouncing things, etc. Get into what we mean when we say removal.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into all the nitty gritty, which I'm so excited to talk about, I think this set is really cool. We're going to delve into a recurring segment that we like to call flood insurance. Gavin, what is flood insurance?
So flood insurance, for those of you who haven't listened to the podcast before, it's basically cards in the set that can give you some kind of advantage if you're getting flooded or if you're getting screwed, meaning that you've drawn more lands than spells and or drawn more spells than lands. This can help balance the game a little bit more and make sure that no matter what kind of hand you draw to open with or mulligan down to, you have the ability to loot, rummage, filter your draws a little bit so that you can get rid of the cards that you don't need and get to the cards that you do need and draw to your outs.
So what does flood insurance look like in Aetherdrift?
So in this set, there's a mechanic called Exhaust, which is a fantastic mechanic. It's basically kicker, right? It's kicker, but you don't pay the cost when you actually have the card on the field already. So it's actually an ability that allows you to do a one-time effect where you would pay some mana when the card is already on the battlefield. And it's usually not a tap effect. There's a couple cards that it's a tap effect for, but most of the time you can activate this at instant speed and it gives you an effect. I have all of the exhaust cards in the set here. All of these cards are very good mana sinks in the late game when you've drawn most of your lands and your board is stable. These are these cards that will actually pull you ahead.
It's interesting to note when you scroll through the cards here that you're seeing a lot of teamer good stuff. You have one black card in winter right there.
That's the
black.
only black card that has exhaust, yeah.
And there are no white exhaust cards to speak of.
That's right. Yeah, so there are no white cards and literally one black card that has this exhaust ability. So when you're looking at cards that are going to provide you with extra value late in the game, those are the color pairs that you're actually going to get. Most of the other color pairings, you need to get value right away, and it won't actually impact the board as much later on. Some of my favorites of these include the Mindspring Merfolk, which can draw you a ton of cards later on in the game. Riverchurn Monument, which is a one-card win condition on its own that can mill your opponent out. And even if you exhaust and your opponent doesn't have half their cards left in their library, it's just a one-time thing, so you can actually still use this card.
We hear you kids like Millstone.
Yeah.
We hear you kids like Millstone. It's so good.
It's really good.
That one's good. Mindspring Merfolk blew my mind. I was not a believer in this card until it was played against me in pre-release, and my opponent brain geysered for 5, and I was just like, oh, okay.
This card is really, really good. It's one of the only ones that has a
+1/+1 counter on each Merfolk. Like, pretend that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. It's just this first line of text here, draw X cards.
Yeah.
That's all you really care about.
So good.
The other thing, too, is there is one card called Elvish Refueler that allows you to reiterate these exhaust abilities. So if you have not exhausted a card already on your turn, you can do it again. And it also has an exhaust ability itself. So worst case scenario with this card, you are putting a 1/1 counter on it every turn for 2 mana. Best case scenario is you get one of your other exhaust payoffs, maybe with loot, or Seed of Varma, or Rocketeer Boost Buggy, or Stampeding Scurryfoot.
Just go with the little mouse that could. Stampeding Scurryfoot is bananas.
Every time you turn, you can make a 3/3 for 4 mana with this 2-card combo right here. not to mention all the other great cards that it has synergy with. So again, every color but white and black have the synergy, and it does seem like these are really good mana sinks. Are there other ways that you can mitigate this flood insurance? Is there a particular card maybe that comes to mind?
Particular card that I would be talking about that we're gonna have to go. I was very surprised by this. I felt like I'd been sharked, but Thunderhead Gunner.
Yeah, the shark that is actually, it looks like an orca actually. If you look at it closely, I'm not sure. The color palette looks a little orca-ish to me.
It definitely looks a little more like a whale than it does like a shark.
Yeah, is that its mouth or?
I'm pretty sure that's its mouth. It Thunderhead Gunner's 4/5. It's 4 and a red. It has reach. Please do not forget that it has reach when you play against this card. It will get you. And it says, discard a card, draw a card, activate only as a sorcery, and only once each turn.
No, there's so many clauses that you can only do it a certain number of times. That's terrible.
That's terrible when you're drawing a new card each turn, throwing away those lands.
This card was designed and probably meant for the discard deck. That's the blue-red archetype. But this card is so good in every single red deck, and it's almost splashable in other colors that you should play it in pretty much every deck, because that card selection once per turn where you can discard and draw, draw and discard, discard and draw. Get that.
Order of operations. Right?
Yeah. Order of operations. Discarding and drawing the lands that you've drawn that are just sitting there, not doing much, and then being able to filter your draw is really, really good.
We hear you kids like Night Market. How would you like a Night Market that's free?
That's free. Yeah, no, I was going to say, like, I was in an RCQ recently, and the winning deck of the RCQ had like 3 or 4 of these Thunderhead Gunners, and they were able to filter through their deck ultra efficiently. The other card that we wanted to talk about for flood insurance is this Beast Rider Vanguard. Another green card. Surprise, surprise. Green's very good in this set.
We're going to talk about the color green a lot. It's easily the best color in Aetherdrift.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends what else you're pairing with, and that's kind of determining what your deck is going to be doing. But
so yeah, the Beast Rider Vanguard is a 2-mana 2/2, so 1 and a green for a creature human knight, and it has the activated ability of 4 and a green to look at the top 3 cards of your library, reveal a permanent from among them, and put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So this can filter and find you permanents. So that's creatures, artifacts, enchantments if you have them. It basically finds everything, and also lands, right? It'll find you lands if you need them.
Yep. It'll find your enchantment-based removal or your artifact-based removal when you need it.
This one won't find, it won't find your instants and sorceries, but it'll find everything else for you. So honestly, if you're, in a game and the game is dragging, you're drawing nothing but lands this whole time, some of these cards are what you need to take your deck to the next level and be able to avoid this kind of flood insurance. If you're screwed, Paul, like if you're not drawing enough lands, what is something else that you can kind of do or lean on in this set?
Peppered throughout the entire set in all 5 colors is the returning ability Cycling. Cycling just says, pay this cost, discard this card, draw a card. And most of them are colorless. They're 2 of any color to cycle and find what you want. Some of them are colored, and the ones that are colored typically have some kind of ability, like if you look at Magmakin Artillerist there, we look at Howler's Heavy, which surprised me. We look at Valor's Flagship, which is insane.
Yeah, if there's colored mana attached to it, it usually comes with some sort of ability like the Howler's Heavy, which gives -3/-0 until end of turn to an opponent's creature. Or, this Clamorous Ironclad it's just 1 to cycle, though. It's just 1 red pip to cycle, which is really good. And then the Magmakin Artillerist has a ping effect. Or Agnosaurus Rex. I mean, that's also a really, really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff to do with the really good cycling cards. And also, it's just really nice to, I'm stuck on land. I need to hit my mana, cycle away my Catcher Don. It's a bummer to throw away your 6/6, but if you're not going to get to 6 mana because you're going to be dead before then, way better to throw that thing away, hit your land drops, play your spells.
Chitin Gravestalker is a really interesting one as well because you can cycle it and it'll help pay for any future Chitin Gravestalkers.
Yes, if you've drafted multiple,
really
that is really sweet. Yeah. I enjoy that card thoroughly.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the cards that we had for flood insurance. You can keep an eye out for some of these cards in your draft and make sure that you come prepared because these games can go pretty long. So having any advantage where you're going to be able to outgrind your opponent and do something with the cards that you're drawing is just, that'll win you some games.
Do not run out of gas.
All right, so our main topic today is removal. Now, we wanted to focus mostly on common and uncommon removal in the set. Paul, how have you felt about the set in terms of removal and the quality of which we're seeing here?
I think the quality of removal is fantastic. I think it's spread out really well in all the colors. We'll certainly be talking about particular colors quite a bit. Yep. When we look at our 17 lands data, our top 5 removal spells, you're noting a distinct absence of the color white, which is very interesting. And that's we're gonna talk about that. White is the worst color in the set. There's kind of no way around that. We're going to constantly be returning to that fact. It's interesting to note then on our top 5, the only red removal spell in the top 5 is Broadside Barrage. And this is in a set that Lightning Strike exists. There's a Shock in the set also. And we're really looking at Sultai everything.
Yeah. This set is interesting because it comes back to the question that we asked in the last episode with Foundations is, what is removal? Because this set has more atypical removal. When I say removal, I mean anything that impacts the board that gives you an advantage so that you have kind of more board presence than your opponent or gives you some sort of other tempo advantage or something else that can swing the tides of battle in your favor, because a lot of these games go long. They go into board stalls. They go into deck outs, possibly. There are some cases where, you are staring at another deck that is also, the same power level as you, and it's going to be who blinks first. So the removal in this set, you really want to save it for the impactful creatures, the creatures that are going to be the game changers of this set. So if you fire off your spin out or your removal on a 1/1 or a 2 mana play, typically that's not what you want to be doing in this set.
You don't want to trade down on your removal. It feels really bad to do so. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes you're on the back foot and you have to just nuke something to stay alive. But really, you want to be holding those cards close to your chest. You want them to be the last card in your hand that you windmill slam and say, "Hiya, got ya."
One thing
you
that
blinked
I've
and
noticed,
I've got ya.
One thing that I've noticed with this set in particular, and haven't noticed it with other sets, is even though the games are very grindy, oftentimes the person that is on the play is the victor. So if you're especially on the draw, make sure that you can get value out of your removal, because the way that these games have been playing out is the person that's on the play is favored to win significantly.
I would also just encourage the person on the draw to not hesitate to just trade stuff. Just keep the board as clear as possible, trade everything as much as possible, and just hold your removal for when your opponent taps out and slams something big and you just say, and step Broadside Barrage that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Do you want to talk about any of these cards? They're really impactful. We have our own favorites and stuff that we want to talk about ourselves, but these are some very impactful cards, and they're in order of color order right now, but these are the top 5 quote unquote removal spells. I wanted to talk about Spike Shell Harrier first because this is a card that I was pretty high on in the pre-release. I thought it was going to be pretty good.
Yeah,
The ability to bounce something is very impactful, but it also sets your speed down. If you're at max speed, it takes you down to below max speed, which can actually be very relevant in some games. And I didn't think that 5 mana was a great rate for this effect, but as it turns out, because a lot of the stuff that is coming down will use your entire turn to do so, it feels okay. And there are some tokens in the format as well that you can bounce for infinite value. But the things that you're bouncing are often things that won't impact the board when they come back down and will gain you all this tempo and this momentum.
Spike Shell Harrier does several interesting things for me. Like, first of all, it's a 5 mana 4/4. It's gonna
It's an artifact.
It's an artifact. It's gonna bounce a creature. It's a robot turtle, which is cool. Make all the Mario Kart memes you want. They're all legit. This is setting back your opponent's speed, which can't be understated. That does a lot. The decks that care about getting to max speed, if you keep them off max speed or take them off max speed, there's a good chance their deck just doesn't do anything, because that is their wagon. They are all gas, and if you make them stutter one bit, you're gonna potentially get there.
Yeah, I'll just read the card real quick just for our audio listeners here. So it's 5 mana, 4 and a blue, artifact creature, robot turtle. Artifact is a relevant creature type. When this creature enters, return target creature or vehicle an opponent controls to its owner's hand. If that opponent's speed is greater than each other player's speed, reduce that opponent's speed by 1. This effect can't reduce their speed below 1. Target acquired, resolution, imminent impact. This card, it's not hard removal. It's a bounce, it's a tempo. Sometimes it's going to feel bad to play if you're extremely behind, but it can at least buy you some time. It's kind of analogous, again, to that blue shell, like in Mario Kart. It's going to, if you're in third place and you see a blue shell whiz by you, you have a good shot at overtaking the leader.
Because there are so many impactful late game cards too, just being able to come down and make their big fat guy go away so that you can then push through damage to close out a game, things like that. It surprised me at first. It's not Mana War, but in the right decks and in the right situations, it can be better than Mana War. Which Mana War is your original bounce creature. That was a 3 mana 2/2 that bounced a creature.
Absolutely. Do you want to talk about the next one, the Thundering Broodwagon? That one has been extremely good.
Yeah, so Thundering Broodwagon was actually the top removal of common and uncommons on 17 lands data recently. This had the highest win rate. It's a 6 mana vehicle. It's 2 black, green. It's a 6/5. It has menace and reach. And when this
Why
vehicle
does it have reach?
Because everything in green has reach.
Everything in green has reach. That's true.
Pay attention to that. Don't miss that, especially for those folks playing Paper Magic and not having a reminder of the little arrow on Arena. The fact that this has reach, that fact that everything that's sweet and green has reach, it will get you.
Absolutely.
Artifact vehicle, menace reach. When this vehicle enters, destroy target non-land permanent opponent controls with mana value 4 or less. Non-land permanent. Nuke that vehicle. If your creature has been locked down under a blue removal enchantment, fuel it back up, get it back out there. You are no longer out of gas. You are back in business.
Absolutely. The other thing about this card, too, that maybe you didn't finish reading, but it has Crew 3 and Cycling. It is a cycling card. So in a Golgari, green-black reanimate style deck, this can be milled or discarded in the cycling in the early game and get it back later in the late game with a back on track or another reanimation effect. It's one of those things where as soon as it comes onto the board, it's almost immediately a 2-for-1. And because of the menace and the reach, your opponent has to respond to it, either offensively or defensively.
Yeah, 6/5 stats are sweet. Crew 3 is a little high, but there's pilots. There's definitely ways to get this thing rolling into battle, and it's
When this
going to
thing
be
comes
scary.
down, when it comes down, it's usually on a stocked board. I mean, usually there's a board stall or there's something on your side as well, even if it's not anything extremely significant. Let's say it's a Scurryfoot. Let's say it's one of those exhaust cards we talked about earlier. That Scurryfoot can make 5 power with its exhaust ability, and you have the perfect token to crew it, a 3-power token. These cards are also very synergistic, and if you can play one, I mean, I thought when the preview started, I thought that 6 mana was going to be too much. I thought it was going to be something that didn't actually get to be played that often because of the mana restriction requirement, the 2 black, the 2 green. And turns out I was completely wrong, because sometimes you can just reanimate it from the graveyard, or the games go long enough where you're going to have those mana requirements met.
Yeah, in a perfect world, you are hard casting this thing and not buying it back. But I mean, you got to hit your lands. You got to play your spells, cycle it away.
All right, so for this next one, do you want to talk about this? This seems like right up your alley, right?
So we are
Talking about Grim Bauble.
Grim Bauble.
You highlighted this card in the previous season.
I highlighted this card. I love me a stab effect. The fact that it's an artifact is super relevant in this set. Mirror artifacts or black X artifacts draining the opponent is really sweet.
Yeah.
Tactile Terror, which we should pull up and talk about.
Mm-hmm. So besides the art being good, can you just give the card a read?
Yeah, Grim Bauble is 1 black artifact. When this artifact enters, target creature an opponent controls gets -2/-2 until end of turn, and it has an activated ability of 2 and a black, tap, sack this artifact, survey 2. So you're in the black deck, you're possibly going to have ways to buy things back, so you want to fill your graveyard. You're also just sculpting your draws. This kind of does everything that I like doing.
This card is great because most boards have something you can kill with it, and then also in the late game will help you cross the finish line, whether that's by finding you something before your opponent can find something, or being an artifact for artifact synergy cards, looking at you, Haunt the Network. And it's one of those things where on its surface, like, it doesn't seem that impressive, but in the actual playing of the games, this card is very good. Would you say it's first pickable?
In the right pack, I would definitely first pick this card. If there was nothing else, like if there was not a signpost, the uncommon signposts in this set are better than what we've seen recently. Definitely. I feel like every signpost in this set, I'm going to go on a limb and say every signpost in this set strikes me as being on par with the Dimir. What was the Dimir bird?
The Dreadwing Scavenger.
Dreadwing Scavenger from Foundations. I feel like each
one of these
signpost is on that level.
I agree with you. I think that the signposts have really been upgraded. There aren't really any dud signposts in this set. We talked about it last episode. Every single one of them is really doing their job, and if you can get 1 or 2 of them, it's a strong signal that you can probably go in that direction, and even splash them sometimes.
The signposts are good enough that if you're in one of the colors already, it is worth splashing. It is worth touching into 3 colors to play your Broadside Barrage, for example.
Yeah. So let's talk about Broadside Barrage, because that's the next one on the list. Broadside Barrage is a instant for 1 blue and a red mana. It is a instant, like I said, and it Broadside Barrage deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Draw a card, then discard a card. So this is a pretty straightforward card. Deals 5 damage for 3 mana to target creature or planeswalker. There is planeswalkers in this set. a Planeswalker in the
A
set, the
Planeswalker.
Chandra.
Yep.
And this card, I don't want to say it's super splashable, but it's a very, very good removal spell. Is it first pickable, Paul?
I would first pick this. I certainly would. I feel like this set rewards being greedy. So I'm
What do you mean
very,
by that?
I mean by greedy, I mean play multiple colors. Play the most raw, powerful things you can play. Expect games to go long. I really just want to have card quality higher than my opponent, and I want to have card selection and card advantage more than my opponent. So this is going to go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Finish your thought.
This is going to nuke a something, and it's going to sculpt my hand. So it's kind of everything. I'm an Izzet Mage at heart. This is kind of everything I want to do. I want to kill your thing and have a better card in hand than the land or whatever that I'm holding.
You know what's interesting is it doesn't actually kill a lot of Green's creatures. Normally, 5 damage would be enough to kill most everything in the set, and in this case, that's mostly true in every color except green.
Except green, yeah.
I mean, green has a couple commons, the Migrating Ketrodon in particular, that this won't kill.
Nope, that's a 6/6. So yeah. No love there for that.
When you say that you should be greedy in this set, I 100% agree. I've found that 3 and even 4 color decks that I've played against have been, they've just beaten up on 2 color decks that I've played. And the reason is they can get their mana, and because the games go long, the longer the game goes, the more likely it is that you are going to get that double blue pip or that double red pip or that double green pip that you need. And even if you're not running that color as a primary color in your deck, I've seen people splash double blue cards, double red cards, double green cards in their otherwise not any of those colored decks. And it's worked out for them. And I think you have to pick and choose. The card has to be very, very good to even allow for that. And you do have to take fixing kind of higher. But the general quality of the ability for green specifically to fix you for these other colors, you really can have. I saw somebody once splash Explosive Getaway, which is a white-red card in their blue-green base deck.
All right. Explosive Getaway is a sweeper, by the way.
Yeah, it's a sweeper. It deals 4 damage to everything, and it phases, blinks your creature, whatever it is.
Save your best thing, deal 4 to everything else. Does anything survive? Probably not.
Not usually,
yeah. Not if you've sculpted the board state appropriately.
Yeah, and usually cards like that would just sit in your hand in most sets. This one, people seem to get there more often than not. That's all I'm going to say about the fixing aspect of it, but feel free to put this Broadside Barrage in any blue base deck or any red base deck. And if you're feeling extremely greedy, you can even put it in your green deck and see if you can get there. Certainly, it's a very good card.
Speaking of green, I would like to introduce you to the Green Terror. You don't realize it, but this has the text 1 green instant destroy target creature.
Yep. It's true.
It's hidden in the fine print somewhere.
I'll
read it. It's 1 and a green instant. This spell costs 1 less to cast if it targets a mount or vehicle you control.
Doesn't even matter, Paul. That line of text, I mean, it's nice, but...
It's nice. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls.
I mean, what else is there to say? We called this out in our preview episode. We said that this was going to be a really good card. We compared it to the version that was in Outlaws of Thunder Junction. We said that was a very, very good card. It's continued to perform extremely well. It's the 3rd best green common in the set altogether.
3rd best common overall in the set. Yeah, top 3,
not just green, of all.
Well, The top 3 cards in the set are all green cards, by the way. The top 3 commons in the set are all green cards. This is number 3. So
Yeah,
that's telling you the quality of green in this set.
it's so good. It really is. The picture tells 1,000 words. It's a green creature slamming into artifacts or a vehicle. And that's kind of what this entire set has been doing. I mean, Aetherdrift has been flavor-wise a death race, but in the end, nature seems to be winning.
It's also definitely a slogging set. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, you're
This isn't
definitely
a drag
going.
race.
Yeah, you're going the ultra long distance. This is the 24 hours of Le Mans.
For all you racing fans out there.
Yeah.
Definitely closer to a Le Mans type race than a drag race. I mean, if we're going American, it's a NASCAR,
This is the
Daytona
600.
500. The
Yeah, this is the
600, yeah.
500 or the 600. This is not something short. And there's no short
No,
track.
for sure. All right, do you want to talk about your favorite cards from the set? Because those are the most played and popular slash, best for the game for the win rate. But we have some of our own favorites here, cards that we favor over others because we either like them more than others or we think that they are underrepresented.
Yeah, I think this list is more a list of interesting cards to talk about than necessarily a list of favorites or best cards.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to call out in white Ride's End.
Yeah.
Standard Pro Tour winning removal spell Ride's End.
You want to read it?
Yeah, Ride's End is 4 and a white instant. This spell costs 3 less to cast if it targets a tapped permanent. Stop me if you've heard that one before. Exile target creature or vehicle. So this is we're seeing this is kind of the staple white removal spell in limited now. 5 mana, targets something tapped, it costs 3 less. This one exiles, which is fantastic. It also hits vehicles, which is really key in this set.
Mm-hmm.
So white is the worst color in this set. This is not a reason to be in white, but if you have already made a commitment to white because you took a fantastic 2-color signpost and have decided to be in white, this is a slam dunk pick. If you go pick 1 or pick 2, 3, you settle into white, you take this as soon as you see it after that.
One thing that I will say about white is that just because it's the quote unquote worst color in the set does not mean you shouldn't draft it. You just need to be the only person drafting it. Does that make sense? Like, if you are going to be in white, you can't be fighting with other people with the color because it's not deep enough to support in a draft pod, 2 or 3 other people. There's not enough quality commons and uncommons for you to be drafting with others if the lane is open.
I agree conditionally. Like all of the colors in this set, it's all about finding what your specific archetype is. If one player is in white artifacts and the other white drafter at the table is not in the Artifact X deck in white, they're not going to have the same priorities that you are as the artifact player. So
yeah, that's true.
It's more about you finding out what your archetype is. Finding out your archetype is almost more important in this set than figuring out what your colors are. You can figure out your colors after because there's a lot of bleed. It's figuring out, okay, I opened a Pactile Terror. I am in the artifact deck. Now, what direction am I going with my artifact deck? Am I playing...
Am I going black artifacts with blue? Am I going black artifacts white?
Am I going all 3 and playing Esper? There's a lot of decision trees there. And I think the archetype is more important than the colors.
I agree with you with that. I would also just say that because white is quote unquote the weakest color, you may see some of these cards go around later than you normally would. Like I've seen Ride's Ends going around and tabling, because people don't want to be playing it. I've seen as many as 4 or 5 broadcast ramblers, which are a pretty good white common. Doesn't mean that you should jump into white at that point. It depends on what you've already picked, but you can actually get some value, and Ride's End is a premium uncommon spell. People
Common.
may not take it as high because of the way that white is in this set.
Yeah. Premium removal spell there. So
The one that I wanted to talk about in white was Gallant Strike. I like this card for two reasons. One, unlike Thundering Broodwagon, this can kill not unlike Thundering Broodwagon. This one cares about toughness instead of mana value of 4. But this card is a 2 mana, 1 and a white, instant. Destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater, and it also has cycling. The cycling aspect of it is really the cherry on top. You really want to be holding your removal, like we said, for the impactful creatures, the impactful things that are going to be on the board that will swing a game in either direction. And if there's one card that can really answer the chunk and the big bodies that green has, it's this Gallant Strike. It's too bad that it's uncommon instead of common, because then I think white might have a better chance of going up against green, but this Gallant Strike is your best answer to that.
yeah, and you're not cycling this unless things have gone very wrong in your game. You're holding
That's
this
right.
close to your chest and saving it for when it's going to nuke the thing that you need it to nuke.
There are much better cycling cards, or cards that you would want to be cycling, than this one, but in a pinch, in the absolute worst case scenario where if you don't hit a land drop or if you don't draw the one particular card that you need for an out, it can't do that. So, all right, enough about white. Let's talk about blue.
Yeah, so blue gives us our enchantment-based removal in Flood the Engine. So this is 2 and a blue.
Interesting art.
Yeah.
Look at that. This person is just like getting run over.
Yeah, they're in the water. They're not having some luck there.
I bet they wish they were a merfolk subtype.
For real. So this is an enchantment aura. It enchants a creature or vehicle. So you're still dealing with the quality of vehicles by being able to stop them, not at instant speed. You know, that's kind of the advantage of vehicles, is blanking sorcery speed removal. But this is still getting there. It says, when this aura enters, tap enchanted permanent. Also worth noting, enchanted permanent loses all abilities and doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. That enchanted permanent loses all abilities is very relevant in the set.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this card to me is blue's best. It's best removal. And it's kind of interesting because I usually don't like these effects very much because it doesn't kill the thing. It doesn't destroy it or put it in the graveyard. But in this case, with Golgari being such a powerful archetype and the graveyard being relevant, sometimes you don't want stuff in the graveyard. Like, for example, the gods that are in this set, there are 2 of them. There's the subblocks. Actually, there's more than 2 gods, but there's 2 really playable gods. There's the blue-green frog. This shuts that down right away and basically makes it unable to be able to do its thing. And if you don't put it in the graveyard, it can't be reanimated or pulled back with like a Dredger's Insight or something. So I really like this removal for those pesky creatures that either are better in the graveyard or can be interacted still, even without having them impact the board at all.
I mean, you shut down that Thunderhead Gunner, you know, you take care of their reach blocker, and they can't keep churning value out of their dead cards.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, this is a catch-all. This is something, again, you probably want to save. I played this the other day on a Venom Sack Lagak, and I regretted it just moments later. So it's one of those things where you should hold it for the very impactful cards, because if you don't and you use it too early, it's going to you're gonna wish you had it back. Now, there is another card that I wanted to talk about in blue that is removal. It's also more utilitarian than that. Let's talk about it. It's Bounce Off. It's 1 mana. It's an instant. It says return target creature or vehicle to its owner's hand. So this type of effect, I absolutely love. I love the mana cost. For me, this is probably synonymous it's probably at the same level for me as run over to blue as green, as run over is to green. This is blue's version of that. This bounce off effect.
This is the classic unsummon. One blue mana instant, return target creature to its owner's hand. The fact that it gets vehicles is awesome.
Yep. So for me, like, the best thing about this though is you can use it defensively as well, because it just says owner's hand and not opponent.
Yeah.
So you can actually blank the flood the engine removal with a bounce off by bouncing the creature or whatever back to your hand. So it's kind of one of those things where this has saved me by saving my bomb more than it actually has been necessarily an offensive removal spell. Although I will say, if you're playing blue, again, more controlling, you definitely want to gain tempo with this. So having this available to you to kind of blow your opponent out when they make blocks or something else can really be very impactful on the board. And the fact that it's just 1 mana makes it all the better.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to black. Do you want to talk about black?
Yeah, we'll quickly gloss over Grim Bauble. We've talked about how great it is earlier. Let's talk about Momentum Breaker. I'm curious your take on this card.
Okay, so picture this. First of all,
I've got the Muppets
card.
dancing and singing in the background. Can you picture that?
I can definitely hear it in my head for sure. No, so this is Momentum Breaker. This is a 2 mana. It's a 1 and a black enchantment. Not many of those in this set, but it's an enchantment. It has Start Your Engines.
Okay.
And then when this enchantment enters, each opponent sacrifices a creature or vehicle of their choice. Each opponent who can't discards a card. That's an interesting line of text. I've never seen it be relevant. You usually save this for when your opponent has a creature or vehicle. It is on there. It also has 2 sacrifices enchantment. You gain life equal to your speed. So this is a non-creature speed matters card.
Okay.
So
how high are you on edict effects in general?
I like edict effects a lot. I think it's one of the cleanest answers to early game problematic creatures, and this set does have quite a few of them. The problem that I have with edict effects is as soon as it gets to the mid game, it's pretty much, I don't want to say worthless, but it reduces its value quite a bit more. And in fact, against the mid game, if you draw this late, typically your opponent is going to have something that they can sacrifice that doesn't really impact the board or the board state very much, and doesn't really impact it other than by starting your engines if you haven't started them already, or possibly gaining you some life, which isn't irrelevant. It's just not the most relevant thing. I think that this card is best on turn 2, and anytime after that, it gets significantly worse in spades, So I think that this card is good in a very limited sense, but it's not a card that I would take or pick very highly.
So it has limited use in limited. The question that I have for you right now is, are you always playing this as a removal spell, or is there ever a reason to run this out on an empty board? How high are you on doing that?
I would never run this out on an empty board. I would always use it to kill something. The fact that an opponent can sack a vehicle as well as or a creature actually makes it worse, because typically with edict effects, you have to choose what you're sacrificing. So whether it's a creature or sacrifice an artifact or sacrifice this, that, or the other thing. The fact that they can choose between vehicles and creatures means that you're not always going to hit something significant.
I'm going to counter you, and I'm going to argue that actually makes the card better early, because I've definitely played matches where opponent goes early vehicle versus early creature because they want to attack with their vehicle the following turn.
Yeah.
And so being able to slam this down and eat their cool vehicle, I think that has a lot more quality.
I agree in part.
Okay.
The thing that I struggle with is that if you're killing a vehicle, let's say it's like turn 5 or turn 6, and your opponent has a creature and a vehicle. And they have the choice of either sacrificing the creature or sacrificing the vehicle. Which one are they more likely to choose? The answer is the vehicle, because it's not something that may impact the board from a battle perspective, unless it's something that, they can immediately crew. I mean, it basically gives them the choice based on what they have in their hand of which thing they're going to sacrifice that would be more impactful.
Well,
So they don't always have to sacrifice it.
That's where the question is what is the most impactful thing,
Yeah.
especially when
the thing is, it's the opponent is going to always choose the one that is less impactful.
Less impactful. I agree 100% there. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this card is fine. I think this card is good in, like I said, the early game. Anything beyond that, I would say that I probably wouldn't even take this like 6th or 7th. I'd try and get it to wheel. But it is a edict effect, which, let's say for a turn 3 or turn 4 Hazoret. That's one of the only ways that black can deal with a Hazoret, which is the god that is indestructible. Aside from this, and maybe Quag Feast and Siphon Fuel, which we're going to talk about later, those are the only real ways in black to deal with this kind of
Quag Feast
creature.
Gets around indestructible?
I believe it does. Let's find out. Please hold. I thought I gave it in minus.
No, I thought it was destroy. Yeah, it's destroy equal to mana value. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Siphon Fuel, which we'll talk about that right now.
But the thing is, it has to just be Hazoret on the board. Otherwise, it still misses.
Yeah. Yeah, Momentum Breaker definitely misses.
I think it's the weakest of the black removal spells, to be honest with you. All right, let's talk about 2 others that I think are better.
Let's go to Siphon Fuel, since we just talked about indestructible. Target creature gets -6 until end of turn. You gain 4 life. 4 in a black instant. Vampires drinking gasoline is a really interesting flavor for this set. That's kind of nifty, and this card is killing the things that it needs to kill. This is one of the only ways you're dealing with those green fatties.
This card is, you would think it's terrible. You would think that this card is bad because it is 5 mana, and it's not. But every time I've played it, I've been very happy with it.
We've come
mostly
along
because. Sorry, go ahead.
A long way from sets where 5 mana -X cards were only -4/-4. So -6/-6 is sweet.
I think the fact that this is common, so you're probably going to be able to get it pretty late, and the fact that it gains you 2 life is not irrelevant. I would say that the -6/-6, that's the right stat line, whereas the Broadside Barrage before only did 5 damage. This does 6, or can kill things that are 6 toughness. I don't know what it is about black in this set, but I've not had a very good experience with it overall. And I think it's because there's so much impactful things that happen either when the creature enters or can happen at instant speed and you lose kind of tempo. It just feels like black removal doesn't seem as impactful as it has been in previous sets. Even the murder effect, the spin out, sometimes I feel like it's, you kill the thing, sure, but it's already done the damage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's also something that we can relate just as a design thing of modern Magic, is cards do more than just exist as stat boxes. It's, while there are vanilla creatures in the set, sure, you got me. Most of the cards in this set that you're going to be caring about are going to be things that have already done something when they've entered the battlefield, or they do something when they die, or they are recurable way.
Yeah, or they have an activated ability that can be done at instant speed in the case of exhaust. I mean, it just seems like every creature you can squeeze a ton of value out of, and 1-for-1ing yourself with the Siphon Fuel, sometimes it's going to feel bad. Sometimes it's just going to feel bad.
Yeah.
The last creature we wanted to talk about, which is actually a removal spell. This demonic junker is the... Would you say it's better or worse than the Broodwagon?
I would say that it is worse than the Broodwagon because it is 7 mana on the base,
Mm-hmm.
and you are not cycling this and buying it back for value. You're
Right.
sculpting a particular deck around this to really get it for max effect.
It's interesting to compare the two, the demonic junker and the Broodwagon, because on the surface, this looks better.
Yeah.
On the surface, this looks better because it has affinity for artifacts. So you're thinking, oh, I can cast this on turn 4 or turn 5. Whereas on the Broodwagon, you would take it, it would be on turn 6. But that rarely happens in my experience. Black does have quite a few artifacts, and we talked about some of them earlier, like the Grim Bauble. But it hasn't been my experience that those artifacts have stuck around long enough for them to be impactful for the demonic junker's affinity cost. And the destroy effect is great. It destroys anything, not just mana value 4 or less, and can also destroy one of your own things to give it itself a boost, but it doesn't have those keywords, reach and menace, right?
Yeah.
Those two keywords impact the board in a way that this cannot.
So, Gavin, this is Demonic Junker for everybody who's listening. This is 6 and a black for an artifact vehicle. It has affinity for artifacts. Its base stat line is 4/3, but it says when this vehicle enters, for each player, destroy up to 1 target creature that player controls. If a creature you controlled was destroyed this way, put 2+1/+1 counters on this vehicle, and it crews for 2. But for what Black is trying to do in this format, like, you're not playing this in the Golgari deck, I don't think. Or you're playing it in the Golgari deck, but you're not happy about it,
It's not that you're not happy about it, it's just you would be looking for the Broodwagons before you look. Like, if Demonic Junker and the Broodwagon are in the same pack, I would slam the Broodwagon 100 times out of 100 over this card.
Yes, absolutely.
Because this requires a build around. Broodwagon doesn't really require a build around. It's just 6 mana and kill something, and it has reach and menace.
And a bigger body.
And it's a bigger body, right? You don't have to destroy one of your own things to make it 6 power. It comes with 6 power. So yeah, that's one of those things where what I was saying before about removal and black removal specifically is, it's fine. It will deal with some of the stuff that you're looking for, but typically, you're going to want to save this for your opponent's best thing.
Yeah. So, Gavin, let's talk about red. What is striking you about red?
Just a little bit of lightning.
Yeah.
I love this card so much.
It's the classic. It's back. 1 in a red. Lightning strike deals 3 damage to any target. It can go to face. This'll win you games.
No, it's not quite as simple as point and boom. But if you must summarize, this card it's good. It always has really been good, and in limited especially, it does what you need to do, which is 3 damage to anything.
Yep. It's interesting to note that its win rate is not on par with the top tier cards. And
yeah, usually it's one of the top removal spells in a format. If it's in the format, it's
usually up at the top. Yeah. So it's interesting to me to note that this is not up there. That doesn't mean don't first pick this card. Like, in the right packs, you're taking this early.
Yes,
especially,
it's still a very good card.
Yeah.
The problem that I see with Lightning Strike in this particular set is that a lot of the impactful cards that you're trying to kill have more than 3 toughness.
Yeah. And I think there's also a problem in that Lightning Strike is a fantastic red card in formats where being aggro and playing the beatdown wins you the match when you get your opponent low on life and take them out. But this is not that format. This is
I thought it was going to be.
I lean toward that also, but I think this is the late game player haymakers format,
Yeah. I think that Lightning Strike is a great include in any red deck. I would play multiple copies of them, but it's not a card that's going to push you over the top or even push you in the direction of red. I mean, it's one of those cards where if I see a pack and I see a Scurryfoot and a Lightning Strike or any of the Signpost uncommons, I may be tempted to take those over the Lightning Strike, even though it's a great removal spell.
I'm with you there. You're taking the best green cards over this almost every time. You're taking the Signposts over this almost every time. Add a little context in there to what you've already picked and what you've already seen to make your judgment call, you know?
Yeah. I think that one last thought on Lightning Strike is, it's basically a core part of the Magic experience for red. Like, I think you're exactly right with the aggressiveness of red. You need to have some kind of shock or lightning strike in the set in order to make red playable. And so this fills that void very well. But in this set in particular, there's just too many cards that either dodge it or you'd have to 2-for-1 yourself to actually kill the creature. It doesn't mesh.
It doesn't go
well
boom quite the way you want things to go boom.
There is a card, though, that does go boom. The Boommobile actually is my favorite red removal spell. It is a removal spell on a vehicle. It's one of those cards that if I saw this, I would probably take it over almost anything else in the pack. It's definitely a first pickable card. I'm going to read it. It's 2 and 2 red, so 4 mana and 2 red, 4 mana in total for an artifact vehicle. When this vehicle enters, add 4 mana of any one color. Spend this mana only to activate abilities. And then it has an exhaust ability. It's X, 2 and a red. This vehicle deals X damage to any target, then put a 1/1 counter on this vehicle. It's also crew 2, and it's a 5/5. So, baseline, you're going to ping something for 1 when this enters, for 4 mana. So it's like basically a 5/5 artifact that pings something for 1 when it enters baseline. If it's any later in the game where you have extra open mana, or let's say you have another exhaust ability that can utilize the 4 mana that it brings in itself, and the next turn, you have more than 4 mana, this can do some serious work, and it can go anywhere. It can go face. So I've seen this card end games quite a bit. On a board stall, when you see Ketrodons facing off against each other in a green-red matchup, mano-y-mano, you throw a Boommobile down in the late game, and this just goes face and finishes the game without any kind of interaction.
Yeah, this is sweet. This is what I want to do in red. This is where I want to be.
I don't think I've ever seen it crewed once.
No?
In my experience, I haven't seen it crewed once, mostly because it ends the game creates a significant advantage before you have the chance to do so. I mean, we've said it all. Is there anything more to say about this card? Boommobile, first pick card?
First pick card. Let's keep the pedal to the metal and let's talk about green.
Yeah, absolutely. Just before we get to green, which obviously is the best color that we've continually said, are there any other cards that we've mentioned so far that you would take over the Boommobile?
Over the Boommobile. I would scroll back up and refresh my brain. I don't think so. I think it's Boommobile for me.
I think these bottom 4 cards are better than anything else that we've talked about so far. Almost. Maybe. Well, we're gonna get to it.
Yeah. Let's real quickly. Let's run over the thing that we've already run over. We're gonna beat that dead horse.
I mean, we just keep running over.
The horse
everything.
just keeps running over the other vehicles. Is what's
That's true.
really happening.
Absolutely.
This is fantastic. It's the third best common in the set for a reason. It's the third best green common in the set for a reason.
It works just so well with not only the green chonkers, but green also has a couple of Death Touchers in the set that this works spectacularly well with. And there's just no reason for you not to play multiple copies of this. It works exactly as intended. You don't need the discount. It's perfectly fine as a 2-mana instant and can give you that much needed advantage in the mid to late game, which
Yeah.
is where these games are going.
So run over aside, where are we finding greatness?
Well, there is this bestow greatness here, where we have this good boy here. It's a 2 and a green, 3-mana instant that says target creature gets +4/+4 and gains trample until end of turn. Exercise kindness, and for nothing remains small forever. That's a Lacrian proverb. So this card is giant growth, but better.
Oh yeah, 4/4
I mean,
and trample.
+4/+4 and trample is a pretty disgusting stat line.
Yeah. This is a removal spell, but it is also just an I win combat, I win the game question mark.
I mean, so when we say removal, technically by winning the game, you're removing your opponent.
Yes, that is fair. Player removal still counts.
Yeah, in green, while this may not be the best quote unquote removal spell, or even by definition a removal spell, it's not actually removing anything. It just gives you so much board advantage that your opponent has to deal with that it can blow games wide open. I was not very high on this card in the early days because I thought it was too expensive for this type of effect. But because the format is slower and that there's more board stalls, having a combat trick that gives this much of a boost can really swing the tides in your favor. Honestly, bestow greatness, it just works exactly as intended. It gives you an advantage offensively and defensively in a pinch.
If your opponent is in green and they make a really questionable attack, start counting your life total up and counting their attackers, and make sure you're not getting blown out by bestow greatness. This is a blowout to avoid if ever there was one for us to talk about.
What's crazy is this is super good with run over. Even if you have a stampeding scurryfoot, that's been exhausted, it has a 2/2. You turn it into a 6/6, and then you have it like run over your opponent's creature.
Yeah.
For 5 mana, that's ridiculous. That's insane. It's just, I know we keep harping on it. Green's the best color. Green has these unreal commons and uncommons. Removing this set, again, you want to save it for those impactful rares, mythics, even some of the uncommons. I mean, all of the uncommons that we're seeing in terms of win percentage are in the either blue-green, green-red, or green-white. There's a couple in green-white. But really, you're looking at this as a quality of commons and uncommons set to stall the board, and then those impactful cards to finish it. You need to be patient, is what I'm saying, and maybe that's why I'm struggling with this set a little bit. Okay, so those are the different removal spells that we had pulled up for this episode. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about this set? Any closing thoughts? Any feelings about this set and how you've been enjoying it?
I would just listen to Obi-Wan Kenobi and patience. Don't fire off those removal spells until you have to, unless obviously you're behind. Fire them off as needed if you're behind. But if you're at parity or you're ahead, just hold them close to the chest. Trade things off. Let resources on the board die. Get ready to slam your haymakers and close the game out big. Go big or go home.
One thing that we neglected to mention during this episode that I wanted to just bring up really quick is Broken Wings. It's the green card. It's a reprint. Basically,
pull it up real quick.
Yeah. It's 3 mana, instant, 2 and a green. It seems like all of green's removal is all instant speed. 3 mana, 2 and a green for an instant. Destroy a target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. An early lead puts a target on your back. No, this card does everything that you want. I wouldn't go as far to say that this is green's best removal spell, because it isn't. We talked about the best removal spells, but this is certainly one that can deal with other problematic things as well. You don't usually need it for the flying because most of the green impactful creatures have reach. But if you have an enchantment on the board that is impacting the board, there aren't too many enchantments in this format, but there's a couple that can be problematic, like Cursed Cloth Wrappings in black. This will deal with those, as well as any artifacts, which all the vehicles are artifacts. So this basically acts as a removal spell as
Cursed Claw Wrappings, is that not an artifact?
well. It might be an artifact and not an
Yeah,
enchantment.
but artifact or enchantment, this is nuking those.
That's correct, yeah.
Vehicles big in this set, those are all artifacts. This is nuking them. Don't hesitate to main deck this card.
Yeah, I would probably put up to two of them in my deck.
Okay. I'm definitely 100% on the first one. I'm less high on the second, but I'm not.
In a best of three, if you're looking at cards that you are needing for your deck, like if you're going into pack 3 and you're like, I have enough fixing and I have all of my playables, and you're looking for sideboard options, this is a great sideboard card in a best of 3 matchup because it can deal with things that maybe you didn't think about during the match. And it's probably one of the most sideboarded cards in the set. Other than that, I mean, just the play draw difference is really important. I want to just re-stress that. This is one of those formats that's slower, so you would think that would matter less, but in the end, really, having that play draw difference is important.
And that's where you lean towards firing off your removal spells earlier is when you're on that differential. So bear that in mind when you're playing your matches for sure.
Absolutely. Well, that's all for us this week. We hope you enjoyed listening. Is there anything else?
I'm gonna put it in park and pass priority to the listeners. Talk to us about what removal spells are really shining for you. What are you enjoying? What kind of tricks do you have up your sleeve that you're using?
Absolutely.
Let us know in the comments.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we'll move to the end step. We'll pass the turn. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Cheers.